For 5 centuries, one word defined the known world: Rome. From the harsh deserts of Mesopotamia to the misty forests of Britain, her legions were invincible, her laws were absolute, her architecture eternal. We were taught that Rome fell in a single night of fire and blood, that barbarians simply walked in and turned out the lights. But the truth is far more terrifying. The greatest empire in history didn't just break, it rotted from the inside over centuries. And the final collapse, it was just the echo of a decay that had already won. This is the true story of how the eternal city broke. This is the end of Rome. To understand the fall, we must first look at the height. By 117 AD, under Emperor Trajan, Rome was a behemoth. You could travel from London to Cairo and never leave Roman soil. But this vast scale was its first terminal illness. When it takes weeks for an imperial order to reach the border, local generals stop listening to Rome and start listening to themselves. By the 3rd century, Rome didn't have a government, it had a series of military coups. This period, known as the Imperial Crisis, saw 26 emperors in just 50 years. Most were assassinated after only months on the throne. Ambition was a death sentence. To stabilize the state, the empire needed a radical cure. That cure arrived with Emperor Diocletian. He looked at the map and realized one man could no longer govern it. His solution? Smash it. In 285 AD, he divided the empire into 2 halves, the Latin-speaking West and the Greek-speaking East. Each half had its own emperor, its own administration, and eventually its own destiny. This stabilization allowed Rome to gasp for air, but it had a profound side effect. The rich, stable, and highly defensible East began to view the volatile, overstretched, and poor West as a liability. If you find this complex history fascinating, make sure to subscribe to Epic Chronicle and hit the notification bell. The West wasn't just militarily weak, it was economically paralyzed. As the expansion stopped, the influx of cheap slave labor, the engine of the Roman economy, dried up. Without new territories to plunder, the treasury was empty. So the emperors did what all failing states do. They debased the currency. They mixed cheap base metals like copper with the gold and silver coins, making money worthless. By the 4th century, inflation was so severe that some regions abandoned coinage altogether, returning to a barter system. This was the death of the middle class. To fund the army needed to protect this declining state, the emperors imposed crushing taxes, especially on the landowners and small farmers of the West. Farmers, unable to pay, fled their land. They became coloni, tenant farmers tied to the land, the direct ancestors of medieval serfs. While the West withered, the East, with its great trade routes through Antioch and Alexandria, flourished. This economic divorce was the true fall. The 2 halves of the empire were already separated in everything but name. But Rome's most dangerous strategy wasn't economic, it was military. The empire had always relied on its legions to maintain order, but who were those legions now? For centuries, to be a soldier was to be a citizen. The legion was Roman culture. But by the 4th century, Romans themselves refused to fight. The West was depopulated, and no one wanted to die for a state that offered only taxes and decline. To fill the ranks, the military turned to the very people they were supposed to keep out, the Germanic barbarians. They were called the foederati, allies. Whole tribes were allowed to settle within Roman territory in exchange for defense. Rome thought they were integrating their enemies. In reality, they were simply hiring the men who would eventually overthrow them. The command structure of the Western army became Germanic. Generals like Stilicho, the man responsible for protecting Rome, were themselves of Vandal heritage. These were soldiers who were loyal to their own kings and commanders, not to the idea of the Senate and people of Rome. By the time the final invasion began, the defenders of Rome and the attackers of Rome were virtually indistinguishable in language, armor, and tactics. The stage was set for the end. All that was missing was a spark. In the mid-3rd century, that spark was ignited far to the east on the Eurasian steppe by a group of warriors so fearsome they terrified even the barbarians, the Huns. The Huns were unstoppable. Their arrival caused panic, and a domino effect of human migration began. In 376 AD, a massive confederation of Visigoths arrived at the Danube River, the border of the Eastern Roman Empire. They didn't come to conquer, they came seeking asylum. Rome, arrogant and overwhelmed, botched the resettlement. They treated the Goths with contempt, even starving them. Within 2 years, the desperate Goths revolted. At the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, they annihilated the Eastern Roman army and killed the Emperor Valens himself. It was the first time an emperor had been slain by barbarians in centuries. Rome was not invincible. Adrianople proved that the Goths were now the dominant force in the West. For the next 30 years, the Goths, now under King Alaric, negotiated, demanded land, and were constantly betrayed by the shifting administrations of the western capital, Ravenna. Finally, Alaric lost patience. On August 24, 1010 AD, the unimaginable happened. The gates of Rome were opened, not by force, but from within, by sympathizers or perhaps a traitor, and Alaric's paths marched in. For 3 days, the Goths sacked the Eternal City. This wasn't the total destruction we imagine. The Goths were Christians, and they spared the great churches, but they plundered the treasures, the art, and the dignity of the Roman world. The world was in shock. Saint Jerome, writing from Bethlehem, famously wept, "The city which has taken the whole world is itself taken." But the sack of 1010 wasn't the end. It was just a symptom of a corpse that was already dead. The Western Empire was now a collection of independent Germanic kingdoms, loosely feigning loyalty to a puppet emperor in Ravenna. The last official emperor of the West was a teenage boy. His name? Romulus Augustulus, literally Little Augustus. In the ultimate cosmic irony, the last emperor shared the name of Rome's legendary founder and its first great ruler. In 476 AD, a Germanic general in the Roman army named Odoacer decided the charade was over. He deposed the teenage emperor and did something radical. He didn't claim the title. Instead, he sent the imperial regalia, the crown and the purple robes, to Constantinople, declaring that there was now only one emperor in the East. Odoacer declared himself king of Italy. With that simple bureaucratic gesture, the 1,200-year history of the Western Roman Empire simply ceased to exist. So, did Rome fall in a single catastrophic night? No, it was a centuries-long decay, a death from 1,000 invisible cuts. It was an empire that became too large to govern, too corrupt to sustain, and too poor to defend. The barbarians didn't destroy Rome, they simply stepped into the power vacuum that Rome had created itself. But Rome didn't disappear. The East, now called the Byzantine Empire, would continue for another 1,000 years, preserving the laws, the art, and the knowledge that the West had lost. And in the West, the Germanic kingdoms that replaced the empire began to fuse Roman law, Christian faith, and German culture. Out of the ashes of the Eternal City, the foundation of modern Europe was born. Rome never truly died. It just evolved. The echo of her fall is not a warning of inevitable collapse, but a reminder that even the most powerful civilizations are fragile, and that their survival is always a race between ambition and decay. Thank you for watching this story of the fall of Rome. If you're interested in recognizing these historical echoes, make sure to stay subscribed. We have a multi-part series on the actual collapse of the Mongol Empire coming soon.